There is nothing that unites a community quite like their desire to watch their content creator of choice suffer. Need me to prove it? When I played competitive on the last episode, I asked you guys to drop me a like and a comment if you want to see more videos of me playing ranked. And the answer was an overwhelming yes. At the same amount of views, that video scored twice as many likes as its quick play counterpart. And the comments were absolutely full of people exclaiming how much they enjoyed the fact that there was some kind of stakes on the line. I mean, hey, it helps out the YouTube algorithm and is a great way of finding out what sort of content you guys want to see. So, if you would be so kind as to absolutely annihilate the like button once more, me and my Q4 ad revenue would very much appreciate it. However, let us not forget that a content creator is but a humble servant to their audience. As such, you ask and you shall receive. You wanted to see more competitive gameplay, and there's nothing that's going to stop me from delivering the content you desire. Okay, maybe there's one thing. Listen, I'm not the only one who isn't a fan of the double barrier meta that has crystallized over the past couple of weeks. My queue times, even in quick play, have blown up in a significant way, meaning if I want to get this video done anytime soon, we have to expedite the process. Desperate times ask for desperate measures, meaning it is time to queue for tank. Let me tell you, playing tank as a support main is a very different experience from playing tank as, well, a tank main. I have absolutely no reservations about solo ulting DPS players who try to spawn camp my supports, and if you think that I will be desperate enough for SRS to stoop so low and play double barrier, think again. The most fun part about being a tank really are the main tank mind games. Especially in Reinhardt 1v1s, you really get to know the opposing team in a way that other roles don't. And once you have figured out their playstyle, establishing your dominance via a flashy display of tank diff is the most immediately gratifying experience you can have in this game. But not all is fun and mind games in the tank category. Being a big, easy-to-hit target really makes you realize just how many different sorts of crowd control abilities are in the game. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say that in some team fights, I spent more time CC'd than not. Some would suggest that this means playing tank would require an innate ability to strategize in order to play around all these different sorts of abilities, considering the fact that your tank failing to create space can spell doom for your hopes of winning the game. But nobody has time to coordinate a bunch of ranked players like a tier 8 amateur team, so why say many word when few word do trick? The loudest language on this planet is the sound you hear when smashing down on your W key. Nobody ever won a game of Overwatch by pressing S anyway, so it is time for you to press W and only W. Just W. Just W. That approach to playing tanks has allowed me to win every single game that wasn't a DPS diff and ultimately landed me in 3200. Now, as much as the last episode was about my attempt of riding back to Masters, no such thing is going to happen anytime soon here. Leading up to our story today, I was actually on a very tilting losing streak, so let's find out if we can break the curse and carry our way to victory, or submit to the fact that we're just not meant to be in Diamond. Ladies and gentlemen, today's episode of Overwatch Ranked Stories takes place on Hollywood. Right from the get-go, I have to apologize for the fact that you'll see me starting this match off on Roadhog. I have had a lot of games that day where some random smurf was insta-locking Hog, and I figured that if somebody's going to feed their brains out on that hero, it might as well be me. Frankly speaking, I wasn't really that worried about what the enemies are going to play, more than I was afraid of how my own team is going to find a way to make this match more difficult than it has to be. I guess playing Roadhog would do the trick. Anyway, there was no time to lose as the attackers stormed out the gates to try and assault the objective. They came out with a Reinhardt Zarya comp, and while I do respect the old classics, him charging onto the battlefield before the rest of his team can catch up meant that he became easy pickings as every single defender laid into him. But much to my dismay, the enemy team was running a Mercy that, with the simple press of a button, could pretend that nothing had happened at all. But you can tell that his immediate annihilation left its mark. Their Reinhardt, while alive, was unsure of how he should approach the site. I, on the other hand, could make use of his indecision by eliminating him in a bit more permanent fashion, though I paid with my own life in order to achieve that. Thankfully, my team had already shredded the attackers to the point where me dying didn't have any effects at all. The red team had to go back to the drawing board and find a more cohesive way of staging their attack. After having witnessed the enemy Reinhardt's poor performance, I was feeling very confident about meeting him on even ground. I wouldn't pass up on an opportunity to test my skills in a Reinhardt versus Reinhardt matchup, as our official no double barrier handshake made this game a very pleasant experience. The next team fight went much in our favor as well. While the tanks were clashing in an attempt to establish dominance, my McCree found the perfect opportunity to use his ultimate and secure victory once more. The attackers were in full retreat mode as they tried to avoid donating more ultimate charge than necessary, and you can be certain that I was happy about the fact that I finally had DPS players on my team who turned their monitors on. But little did I know at that point how much trouble that Mercy pocketed Smurf account would cause. After an obnoxious losing streak, I was really glad to find myself in a game where I got to flex my main tank muscle. I outplayed the opposing Reinhardt with ease, while the red team depleted the ultimate bank without a good return on investment. It's gotten to the point where I bullied their main tank off of Reinhardt, and now he would try his luck at destroying my barrier the way I annihilated his at the beginning. Of course, I had to adjust my playstyle accordingly, but since the red team no longer had a main tank to protect them, I would have no trouble at all finding an opening for a shatter. Unfortunately, our team had varying ideas about how aggressively we should approach this defense. While I obviously wanted to go for stagger kills to bleed more time off the clock, I quickly found myself without the help of my cowardly supports. My McCree, on the other hand, figured he'd try his hand at frontlining for a hot minute, but was taught very swiftly that plus 25 HP don't turn a DPS into a tank. Losing one DPS was definitely bad, but what was even worse than that was losing the second one as well. All of this could have been avoided if only our team was on the same page when it comes to our game plan, particularly the age-old gambit of chasing staggers. Things only went downhill from here as our former McCree, now soldier, found himself spawn camped by the opposing pharmacy. With a play like that, the attackers ensured that we'd be suffering from a split spawn, and as such, they would earn themselves a lot of distance on the payload. To say that we had a hard time coming back from that misplay would be an understatement. Despite the presence of no less than 4 hit-scan heroes on our team, we just couldn't deal with all the damage raining down on us from the sky. It wasn't until our Baptiste finally took care of the enemy Pharah that we had a chance of stopping the payload only a few meters away from this second point camp. You can discuss the intricacies of whether or not investing a nanovisor for cleanup on what was already a victorious engagement was worth it, but considering how badly we got rolled up until this point, I can't blame them for trying to really drive home this victory. Once again, our team was not at all on the same page about our positioning. While Zarya, Ana, and I were terrified of the idea that we could C9 the turret, the other half of our team tried to do their hit scan diligence by sitting up on high ground. The thing with controlling high ground as a hit scan player though is that it doesn't matter if you can't land a shot. The red team was willfully unimpressed with our lack of accuracy and took it back in no time at all. My unwillingness of swapping meant that I couldn't protect my hit scans and be on C9 watch at the same time, and that shadow that I was holding onto obviously didn't prove to be useful in the face of a team that put all of their resources into a character that was dominating the sky. But the real nuisance here was the enemy Mercy. Not only did she keep on reviving the few eliminations that my team could muster to obtain, but it was obvious to me that their power wouldn't be half as effective if it wasn't for them turning splash damage into annihilation damage with the press of a button. But two can play at that game. One of our supports made the noble sacrifice of combating fire with fire, and that bold confidence that prompted the attackers to act like our spawn area was theirs would ultimately be their downfall. But we were far from victorious at that point though. If we cannot cleanly wipe the attackers and as such annihilate every last bit of momentum they acquired, then there's no way we're going to be able to stop them from capping the last point, which means it was time to send a message. I brought my hammer down with a ferocity that rivals the god of thunder himself, but all that would mean nothing if I didn't follow up on it. Inspired by my act of confidence, my team followed straight behind me to cover my reckless assault, and as such, we found ourselves victorious at last. Except we hadn't succeeded in actually wiping their team, and me, thinking the rest of my comrades would still follow me, ran it down mid into certain doom. We found ourselves in a perpetual state of combat ever since they capped the first point, and nothing I did or said could convince my team to try and defuse it along with me. It is really frustrating to see when people think that getting a pick or two is enough to end a team fight when you give up so much more by not chasing down the survivors. If nobody else, at least my Zarya started to understand what I was on about as she followed my every move in order to make sure that I can pull off the game-winning play we needed to. Wow, that was really poorly worded. A game-winning play to win the game. Good job, Cliff! Can you tell I write for a living? Either way, it was unfortunate that my Zarya woke up the Roadhog that I meant to charge, but ending up in the enemy backline was just what I needed to land my shatter. My Zarya must have realized the importance of taking out the enemy supports, and while missing the enemy Mercy with that graph wasn't ideal, she can only revive so many players, and their Ana would not be one of them. The two of us were brawling it out in the front line to defuse the attackers' engagement before they could set up on the payload, but because the rest of our team didn't move up with us, they found themselves heavily under attack by a Tracer. Playing against a smurfing Tracer is always really frustrating to me when queuing for tank, because I've actually gotten pretty good at combating them on Zenyatta over the years. But whenever I'm on Reinhardt, or heck, even on Roadhog, I find myself struggling to deal with them more than I have any right to. The attacker's big advantage was the fact that our team wasn't functioning as a unit. The distance between our front and backline has been the deciding factor all throughout this game, but now that the payload is mere meters away from its final destination, there was no longer a distinction between the two as everybody tossed themselves on the objective. Zarya and I were finally in our element as I uttered the words that would inspire our entire team to give it their all in this last team fight. keep me up, I have Shatter. There was no hiding from my hammer now. If the enemies wanted to capture this objective, they would have to take it from my cold, lifeless hands. And I wasn't about to make that easy for them. They can stall and stall all they want, but ultimately all it took for us to stop the payload was being in a position where we couldn't help but be stacked together. I really hope that this round gave my teammates some food for thought, because if we can't fix our indecisiveness, attacking on Hollywood is going to be rough. After that roller coaster of emotions that was our defense round, I really couldn't help but feel anxious about how our offense is gonna go. When it comes to our individual matchups, I was confident in us being able to give the red team a run for their money. The only problem was that they were really good at funneling all of their resources in unison versus us, who only have a vague idea of the word team play. The first teamfight of the round immediately showcased that exact thing, because while I wanted to push the front line back onto the objective, both of our DPS were busy whiffing shots on a single tourbillon that we could have easily LOS'd. Me and my barrier were sent packing in an instant, and even after all that happened in the previous round, my Zarya was the only one who understood how to play aggressively. Unfortunately, her confidence in my abilities and leadership caused her to be stuck behind enemy lines, and without me being able to protect her retreat, she couldn't help but get staggered. Now, this is gonna sound really cocky, but the problem with having higher elo experience is the fact that you're trying to play how you learn to win. Overwatch is a fast-paced game, and aggression, more often than not, is the key to victory. It would have been really easy for me to throw a hissy fit about my teammates not playing correctly, but really, it was my fault for not adjusting my playstyle. Of course, my teammates weren't playing like a team of grandmasters because they're freaking diamonds. Ultimately, what matters more than playing properly is playing together. It doesn't matter if you're feeding, as long as you're feeding as a team, and in that moment, the enemies understood that much more so than us. As much as I knew that I was the better Reinhardt, none of that mattered if he's getting supported by his entire squad, while my own comrades are playing so far in the back that they could swap heroes if they wanted. It dawned on me that, in order to capture this objective, I had to get tricky. Making use of the fact that the red team loved to stack together, I went for a quick flank shadow to disrupt their lineup. Of course, everyone tried to rush in to help, which put them in the perfect position to get caught by my Zarya's Graviton Surge, where by then, they wouldn't have enough cooldowns to survive the damage. I had given my life in the process, but at last we could sit our team on the objective and finally get the show on the road. Player was coming in clutch with the key hero swaps all game long, and while the red team made a desperate attempt to stall out the cap, they would be no match for the combined forces of a team that had no choice but to attack the same target. It most assuredly was not smooth sailing from there on out, but I slowly started to understand what had to be done in order for us to win the game. This wasn't about me trying to ego the enemy Reinhardt, neither was it about trying to get a team of diamonds to play like masters. All I had to do was consistently run it down mid in order to bait out all of the enemy team's cooldowns so that my Zarya could make use of the free real estate and dish out the damage that my DPS were unable to provide. I mean, in fairness, it's not like they were completely useless. If nothing else, the ultimates were on point when it came to keeping the enemies on the stagger train. But to think that all I had to do to win the game was acting like an incompetent boosted diamond player was absolutely insane to me. Unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be that easy, because our Japanese DPS Smurf over there was exhausting every single choice in the game that could benefit from a mercy pocket. Of course, the enemies had ultimates to spare because of how long they didn't get a proper teamfight for, and as such, we found our momentum utterly obliterated. The only saving grace was the fact that I still had my Shatter. As long as I don't waste it like an actual diamond right now, we should be able to come back. About that. This was definitely a bad situation. We had wasted too much time on the first point to be able to afford blunders like that, not to mention the psychological impact that is bound to affect my teammates with every lost engagement. Thankfully, we still had some aces up our sleeves. Our Hanzo opening the teamfight up was just the boosting courage we needed to challenge the opposition. At that point in the game, I had convinced my entire team to tape down the W key along with me, and you can tell that the enemy Reinhardt was not sure about how to deal with that. The red team had to funnel every available cooldown and ultimate into his survival, but even landing a massive shadow couldn't negate his panic as he completely whiffed a charge. I was hiding my true power for most of this attack round, but with us engaging in what we hoped to be the final team fight, I figured it was only fitting to make use of my gargantuan brain to show their Reinhardt once and for all that I was the better tank. I had tasted blood, and thanks to my Anna's nano boost, I'd finally enjoyed the support that I needed in order to satisfy my rage, with every swing of my hammer becoming much more deadly. The temptation of charging into the surviving defenders was there, but I tried to make sure I don't end up getting sleep-dart. We were approaching the last few meters of our journey, ready to combat whatever stalling nonsense the defenders would decide to swap to, but at last, they had given up. Now, this may seem like an abrupt ending to many of you, but you can find the true resolution of this match in the lobby chat. As it turned out, our smurfing friend over there had been incredibly toxic throughout the match while demanding a mercy pocket. Much like I was playing below my usual SR, he couldn't adjust to the playstyle of diamonds and probably got very tilted over the fact that me feeding my brains out somehow helped us winning teamfights. If that wasn't the morale of our story, I don't know what is. Between two players trying to rank up in diamond, one of them decided that the only way to win was by demanding everyone to play around them, while I was out there trying to find a way for us to play as a team. Ultimately, I couldn't carry this game any harder because I couldn't carry at all. This victory was the result of our combined efforts, and misplays or no, I couldn't have done it without the rest of my team. Just like I couldn't have made this video without you guys watching. Your continued support is what motivates me to work hard on the content I put out, and I really hope that I can meet your expectations. If I did, hey, let me know by dropping me a like on your way out. Consider subscribing if you want to see more, and definitely ring that bell to be notified about my next upload. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and until next time, peace!